Trading Hands by Christian Smith. Recorded by Christian Smith. Issue 2. Prologue. Footsteps. Fast. Turning. Down another alley. Running away. Fleeing. The short, bald man suddenly emerged from a side street and stopped abruptly. The pitch-black night was pierced by the illuminating glow of moonlight that cast long, dark shadows in the alley. The once fleeing man had stopped on a dime and was now staring wide-eyed at a skull. Not a real skull, but a bright, white illustration on a broad chest. A chest that belonged to a killer. The bright white skull was the last thing the bald man's eyes ever saw, before shots rang out and all went dark. Chapter 1.
Eric?
A voice screamed out.
Eric Haller? Get your butt out of bed.
Eric mumbled as his dreams dissolved, and the conscious world dripped in. He slowly rolled and saw red numbers on his clock say 9:03. Dang, Eric thought. This is the 4th day in a row I've slept in again. Busy night, Eric whispered. The big boy swung his legs over the edge of his bed and touched the cool wood floor. He could have slept many more hours, but his friend Christian had invited him over. He was pretty sure he knew why he'd been invited, and stood up to get dressed. His door flung open, and his mother stepped in with a look of anger on her face. But her face softened when she saw Eric awake.
Honey, you need to wake up on time more often. You've been slacking.
Mrs. Haller's face shifted to stern again as she spoke.
We're leaving in 10. Get going.
It's been a week since I've seen you, Eric. Why haven't you replied to any of my texts? Christian quizzically asked with a face of concern. Eric walked to the other side of his friend's basement and picked up a dart lying on the floor. It's just been a crazy week, recovering from the octopus dude's attack. That was a week ago, Christian replied with annoyance. You weren't even hurt. That's no excuse for not sending a text. I've just been busy, Eric countered. I'm here now. Happy? I'm not mad, Christian quietly spoke as he walked up to Eric. I was worried, man. That's all. Well, I'm fine now. And here I am, so shut it, Eric spoke with a dark tone. So why am I even here? 'Cause we were gonna hang out. That's why you came. Well, I'm busy today. I'm calling my mom. I'm going home. As Eric walked to the stairway leading back upstairs, Christian shouted out, I lost my powers. Eric, I lost them, and I'm worried. I'm worried I gave them to you. Eric turned slowly back to Christian with a sinister look on his face. I'm power-free, Christian, and even if you had given them to me, I could take care of myself. Then Eric took the small dart that was still in his hand, and with lightning speed, he snapped it out of his hand, and it flew straight past Christian's face, nearly nipping his ear. Then the dart landed on the dartboard behind Christian, piercing the dead center. Bullseye. Christian looked up in horror as Eric turned back away. Halfway up the stairs, Christian heard Eric mumble, I'm fine. Just fine. Chapter 2. Waiting. It was the worst part of the job. He had enhanced senses, the accuracy of a trained Marine, and the widest selection of firearms in town. But even with all these extraordinary abilities and resources, Eric still had to surrender to time. Time was everywhere, ticking away at the bottom of the ocean to the top of any mountain. And Eric, ungratefully, had to wait the same as anyone else. Aaron Pan, kingpin of black market drugs. Even in the best-looking neighborhoods, Eric could always find illegal drugs. Eric Pan was in North Riot, Eric's own turf. Every drug kingpin that popped up in Eric's hometown, he had put down immediately. This would be no different, Eric thought. Eric sat crouched on top of a gas station roof, waiting, listening for Aaron to return. Eric had tracked him across town until Aaron had shut himself into a large warehouse, adjacent to Eric's gas station hideout. Eric's back ached as he lay flat on the hard, creaking metal roof of the station. He rolled onto his side to ease the pain. Eric regretted the comforting roll as the metallic sheets of metal screamed from his movement. Click! A door! Eric raised his head as fast as he could, without making a noise, and sure enough, Aaron was sneaking out of a small door in the warehouse. It was time. Eric slowly grabbed his rifle, a military-grade sniper rifle, with enough range to hit a penny across town. Putting his hand on the sleek black metal, comfort washed over Eric as he put the gun to his shoulder. He popped the two covers on his scope's lenses and quickly put the cool ring of steel to his eye. There he was, Aaron, standing near the door, looking nervous for some reason. Eric wanted to go home, so he lined up his shot and was about to put a bullet through Aaron's head when the door clicked open again, and a small girl with bouncing long blonde hair skipped over to Aaron. The girl couldn't have been more than 5, and Eric hesitated to shoot. The girl had the widest smile as she put her arms around Aaron's waist. Aaron's nervous frown dissipated to a slight smile at the sight of the girl. Aaron picked the girl up with a laugh and kissed the little girl on her forehead, and stroked her hair tenderly. Eric hesitated some more, but finally decided to go through with his task. As Aaron slowly strolled towards a car with the small child held tight, Eric aimed again and squeezed when the crosshairs were on Aaron's bald head. She'll be better off anyway, Eric thought, while a bullet was rocketing towards its target. This way she won't have to live with a criminal for a dad. A blood-curdling scream was released as the little girl's father toppled to the ground in a heap. Her blonde hair was speckled with blood as the girl screamed and screamed at the top of her lungs. Aaron lay in a heap, eyes rolled back, dead. Eric didn't even flinch as the screaming persisted. He scrambled down from the roof and slowly made his way back home. Eric's face was hard. His lips were shut tight as he walked up his driveway. He could still hear the screaming in his head as he cracked an evil, dark smile. Chapter 3. Rebel lay in her bed interpreting squiggles and marks on her ceiling into sensible pictures and creatures. As a 17-year-old girl, she loved to sleep, and after sleeping, she would just lay in bed and stare at the ceiling. When her phone beeped on the bedside table, she barely noticed it until it beeped again, and she decided to conjure up enough energy to grab it and check the screen. Missed call from Christian, the screen read. Rebel truly wondered why Christian had called. They texted some, but Christian was 15. They weren't close. He'd never called before, so Rebel decided to text back and ask what he wanted. As she started to tap out words, the call came through again, and it was Christian. She finally decided to answer.
Yeah?
Rebel unenthusiastically answered. I need your help. Please, Rebel. What is it? What do you need help with, Bud? Bud? Christian repeated. Is that all I am? Just some little annoyance to you? Just some little kid? Christian, calm down. I can call you Bud if I want. Now, can I go back to bed now? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting off track, Christian ashamedly replied. I'm just worried. Eric needs our help. Rebel's face contorted into confusion at this. Christian, I've almost never talked to Eric. How can I help? I'm just calling everyone, Rebel. Anyone that can help would be great. I'm really worried about him. He's not answering texts. He closed himself off from his friends. Even his mother's worried. I need help, Rebel. I really do. Christian was surprised, as he had to choke back tears for his dear friend. After a pause, Rebel replied with the same steady, bored voice. I don't think I can help, Christian. Why don't you talk to your mom? Then she abruptly hung up. I shouldn't have been so hard on him, Rebel thought. But he totally has a crush on me. Rebel grunted and laid back in her bed, wondering what Eric was up to. Eric wiped the blood that was on his knife onto the grass, streaking the small patch of lawn with red. Eric kicked the body beneath his feet, satisfied with his work. Eric leaned down on one knee and peered at the cold white head of the man. Early 30s and already kidnapped 12 children. Eric spoke to the body. I think a good long nap will be good for you, my friend. Eric reached out and closed the eyelids. The cool skin easily slid down to shroud the man's dead eyes staring into space. Eric shoved his knife back into the sheath on his hip with a quick, satisfying slide of metal. Eric whipped his head around. Sirens! He was standing in the dead man's backyard when he'd creeped up and slid the knife in the man's back. Hot dogs were burning on the grill next to them. Well, chap, I'm afraid I can't finish your dogs for you. I've got a scram. I was gonna burn the evidence at a more leisurely pace, but let's go to plan B. Eric quickly thought. Eric jumped up and grabbed a thick hanging branch of the neighbor's tree, and he started to quickly swing his way up. He then paused and dove off the tree, landing on the house next door. Scrambling behind a ledge, Eric waited for the cops. Who had called 911? Eric wondered. He truly thought no one had seen the murderous deed. 5 officers burst through the gate of the backyard, about to run towards the dead body. Then Eric clicked the button. A signal went from the small remote and set off the small explosive he had stuck to the still-burning grill's propane tank. The grill exploded, burning the grass around it as well as the dead man's body. The police yelled and ducked from the fireball. When the sound of the explosion died down, Eric's victim's body was already black as ash. No evidence, Eric thought. He was about to turn away and escape when he heard a muffled feminine cry. A teenage girl emerged from the house. Her face was wet with tears. As mascara dripped down her face, one of the cops ran over to support her tottering body. Must be one of the captives, Eric pondered. 2 birds, 1 stone. As Eric scampered off, he hoped the girl hadn't seen his face, and he briefly considered getting a mask. No, I'm not a criminal. Only criminals wear masks. I'm helping society, thinning the flock from the evil and the wicked. He walked home as the sun slowly set. Chapter 4. With the toe of his boot, Eric pushed in a small indentation at the bottom of his closet. The wide brown doors slid sideways like a normal dresser, and Eric's clothes lay beyond. But then all the clothes shifted backwards, farther and farther back. Then a smaller dresser rose up, filling the now empty space. A small keypad ejected out horizontally, then shifted up so Eric could type the code. He tapped the touch screen with quick beeps. A small indicator light on the pad turned green, and the small pad slipped back into its slot, virtually disappearing. The smaller, secret dresser's doors slowly slid open, revealing something much more dangerous than clothes. Rows of weapons sat within this new dresser, looking back at Eric with power. Eric took a grenade from his belt and stuck it within the dresser on a circular pad. Motors whirled as a series of robotic arms sorted the grenade away into its proper place. After that day, the day Christian, sitting on the bench in the church, had shocked Eric and given him very unique abilities. Immediately, Eric's mind was full of new ideas and knowledge. Eric, within a week, had built this ingenious, secret weapons rack. Through more than illegal means, Eric had also acquired great stores of weapons, before using these very weapons to kill the black market dealers who had given them to him in the first place. Eric quickly realized he also had an inhuman marksmanship ability given to him. After storing away the last gun Eric had used that day, he heard a doorbell. Eric opened the door on a worried-looking Christian. "Eric, hey, sorry, I was just in the neighborhood," Christian said, gesturing at his mom still in the car in the driveway. "Just thought, maybe we could talk." Christian sounded desperate, and Eric was done. Eric started closing the door on Christian without a change in mood. "Wait!" Christian shouted, sticking out his foot to stop the closing door. "I just got off the phone with Malachi. He's not the only person I've talked to from church, Eric. We're all concerned for you. I'm just the only one who's tried to do something about it." "I just thought—" "No, Christian. I'm fine. And I told you that." Eric's eyes were dark, and his tone was more serious than ever before. "Now get out, and don't come back." The door slammed shut, permanently closing their friendship for good. Chapter 5. "12 more dead, sir," a large, buff man said, as if reciting a speech. "No," a slightly muffled voice coarsely exclaimed. A sword came down on a chair, splitting it in two. The big man didn't even flinch at the action, having experienced this many times before. The sword-bearer looked up at the big man, a frown on his face. He picked up a mask lying on a table nearby. Placing it over his face, he strutted out of the room. Human traffic was bustling outside the office the masked man had come from. Men were carrying bombs and firearms in large storage carts across the large, open, underground warehouse. Technicians were sitting at computers, and grunt workers were mopping or carting around supplies. "Men!" the coarse-voiced man shouted after exiting the office. The workers looked up in fear at the grotesque, much too realistic skull mask on their leader's face.
12 dead,"
he shouted again.
12. North Riot may be a small suburban town, but 70% of our drug profits come from there. A single man with a skull on his chest killed 12. 12 of our dealers. One man. I've trained you all in self-defense since I received my powers. And not one of you can stop this gun-waving idiot."
Spit flew out of the skull mask, spraying anyone close enough to his face.
I want 20 men. I want 20 men to go into North Riot and kill this meddler. $20,000 for the man who puts a bullet in his head or a knife in his back.
As the criminals scrambled to leave on their mission, the buff man from the office quietly spoke. Sir, he's not just some meddler. From what I've heard, he has the training of a Navy SEAL.
Did I ask your opinion, boy?
The leader spit.
Now get out of my way.
The leader tried to shove the big man away, but he didn't budge. I've had enough from you, the big man calmly stated. His muscular arm flew for his leader's mouth, but he couldn't make contact with the skull mask, as his leader quickly ducked and then jabbed the big man in the stomach.
You're done, Reagan,
the leader said after stumbling backwards slightly from the jab. Reagan was unprepared for what came next. The leader jumped and kicked Reagan in the face. His head flew back, hitting the wall. Then Reagan's previous leader pulled out 2 daggers and stabbed them into Reagan's arms, pinning them to the wall. Reagan groaned in pain, but he couldn't move. Then the masked assailant punched Reagan over and over in the head, until blood dripped from his nose.
I learned most of those moves from you, Reagan. Remember that I am far superior to you all. Anything you can do, I can do with ease. Any task I can accomplish. I am the taskmaster.
Walking away from Reagan's sagging, bleeding body, he spoke to his men.
Someone finish him off, and find me a new bodyguard. One that's more submissive. What are you doing, men? Get to it, and take care of the man with the skull on his chest.
As he walked back to his office, a shot fired, and Reagan slumped closer to the ground. In his office, the taskmaster pulled open his computer and watched video upon video of the skull-chested man, which the media had dubbed the Punisher. He watched every security cam and video, watching the skills, memorizing, mastering. Chapter 6. Sometimes Eric wondered if it was truly worth it. All the killing, all the death. Was he helping his city in any way? With every drug dealer that he downed, 2 more took their place. Was he better off just quitting? No, he thought. I must be making a difference. I know I am. I've already saved kidnapped victims. I won't quit now. Eric stared out into the distance as the sun was slowly setting on the horizon. It was the small things, like a simple sunset, that brought Eric back to himself, even just for a few seconds. He was on the outskirts of North Riot, in an industrial section of town. Eric was sitting on yet another roof, enjoying the view from on top of a factory. 2 more dealers downed today, and Eric was taking a quick, and he thought, well-deserved break. A crackle. Not from nature. Eric heard it again. Very quiet, but definitely there. Eric laid flat on his stomach, peering over the roof's edge for the cause of the noise. It sounded electronic, like a walkie-talkie. Do they think I'm stupid? Eric whispered. Someone, or someones, were after him. Cops are too good. This is the work of someone more amateur. A creaking board inside the factory below him. Crunching leaves, the click of a small button. Eric realized there were more than he first thought. What did they want? If they thought they could kill him this easily, then they were very dumb. Very slowly, a metal door at the ground level below Eric creaked open with a metal grinding noise. A man, or perhaps a woman, Eric couldn't tell with all the body armor, tiptoed out of the factory, scanning left and right for who knows what. Probably looking for a squirrel. How stupid are they? There were many others around the building. Eric could sense it. But the armored creature that Eric was peering down at was the only one in sight. Black plates of armor covered the soldier from top to bottom, but Eric was too smart for them. Back, neck, left elbow, and that gas mask. Those are the weak spots. Well, they aren't 100% stupid today, Eric thought. Those gas masks will prevent some of my toxic gas grenades from being effective. Well, let's see what those plates are made of. Eric took a coin from his pocket and tossed it off the roof 10 feet farther than the soldier. The small metallic clang of metal on concrete was amplified greatly by the dead silence all around. But unlike what Eric hoped would happen, instead of walking towards the coin to give Eric a better shot, armor clinked as the probably male soldier whipped around towards the building that Eric crouched on. Oh, no time to hide. Let's hope that armor isn't made of diamonds. With a small pen-sized and shaped object, Eric shot a small circular tab at the helmet of the man, just above the gas mask. The tab clicked and stuck, and as the soldier yelled out and raised his gun, the acid from the tab started burning through the helmet like styrofoam. And then as shots rang out, the man's yell of warning changed to a scream of excruciating pain, for the acid didn't stop after the helmet was gone, and the man's head dissolved away as well. Well, not the best way to start a fight, Eric mumbled. Now they all know I'm here. Let's take this inside. Eric opened a door on the roof that took him to a ladder down into the factory. As his boots hit the concrete floor, the soldier from another room walked out and almost shrieked. That hesitation was all Eric needed to whip out his Glock and take one shot to the head. 2 down. How many more? As Eric examined his situation, he noticed he was in a storage room, connected to many other small rooms. The brownish-yellow walls made Eric's stomach turn, in addition to the many strange smells. Boxes also were strewn around the rooms, signifying how old and forgotten the factory was. The gunshot would probably bring any men that were searching the outside of the building inside. Game plan, Eric mumbled. Eric placed a circular disc the size of a landmine on the dusty floor in front of the main doors to the rest of the factory. He turned the knob on the disc, and it beeped once. Eric sneaked back into a storage closet to wait. After about 20 seconds, the doors burst open, and 4 mercs marched in, stopping a few feet behind the mine, and scrambled backwards. When the mine didn't blow, the men tossed an abandoned box on the ground at it. Nothing. The men took a few more steps back, and one of the mercs raised his gun and shot the mine. The bullet shattered, spraying shrapnel all around the room. 4 more soldiers approached, the first group, and then the 8 armored men and women marched past the mine. Eric, hiding in the closet, hearing a ding as the mine detected the group marching past, immediately pushed a detonator. The mine imploded, and all 8 men were sucked into the mine and could do nothing to escape its pull. The walls were tearing away as boxes and rubble all collected, right together in a tightly packed ball. Before everything changed direction, and all 8 men and hundreds of pounds of debris exploded outward, splattering everything in sight. As Eric creeped from the closet, he thanked his bulletproof mine and walked past the chaos all around. Make that 10, he croaked. As Eric opened the large doors the men had marched to their deaths through, 10 mercenaries' gun barrels were aimed right at his skull. One shouted out with a muffled but clearly feminine voice, "I don't care if you have that stupid skull in your chest. You die today." "Not today," Eric shouted, pressing a button on his belt. Seconds after, machine guns roared, bouncing off a red-lit force shield surrounding his body. "Where does he get all this tech? It's hundreds of years ahead of today's top geniuses," one of the mercs said with a surprise. "Talk about it in Hades, scum," Eric shouted with confidence. He whipped out a handgun and let out a spray of bullets towards the mercs before jumping behind a large crate for cover. The buzzing sound that resulted from his force shield ceased as the shield powered down and the red glow dissipated. He thought he had shot 6 of the mercs with his last volley from his pistol. 4 left out there. Okay. Eric took a circular tab from his belt and tossed the smooth metal disc on the wall closest to him, above the crate he was crouched behind. The disc glowed red as blood and shot out a laser beam, sweeping across the room with a loud zap. Eric heard 2 consecutive heads hit the floor after being detached from their bodies. Eric then quickly stood and dashed across the warehouse storage room, crossing the opening between the crate he was behind to a newer crate. 2 stunned mercs quickly tried to riddle Eric with bullets from their guns. Eric thought he made it across unhurt until he looked at his shoulder. There he saw blood seeping down his arm. "Oh, dang! You'll pay for that," Eric groaned as he turned away from the mercs closing in on him. Eric saw a sheet of metal leaning against the wall behind him. In the shiny chrome finish of the metal, Eric could see the 2 blurry reflections of the mercs in dark armor. Eric turned on the laser of his submachine gun and pointed at the sheet of metal, guiding the laser to bounce off the metal into one of the merc's dark goggles. Even with shaded goggles, the laser stunned the merc approaching from the left, making him stumble a little and stop moving to get his bearing again. Eric took his opportunity to peer around the crate and shoot the temporarily blind man in the head squarely with 1 bullet from his pistol. "Good thing," Eric thought. "Last magazine." Eric's thoughts were abruptly shot down when the final remaining merc in the room shouted out with a thick accent Eric couldn't place. "I have grenade in hand. I will throw. I will. Stand with hands up." "Great," Eric mumbled. "I get the stupid guy." Eric slowly, with more care than a woman with a jug of water on her head, rose from behind the crate, with his hands raised, but he still held the gun in his hand. Eric wondered why this man wouldn't just shoot him, since all the other mercs seemed not to hesitate at trying to kill him. "You just stay there," the merc spit. "Master told me to kill you. Look what that done for them." The man gestured at the scattering of bodies lying dead on the floor. "Know how much I get if I bring you alive to cops? Big price on your head. Alive. Everyone want to catch the big punisher. Now have I." "Yeah, okay, shut up, stupid," Eric said as he whipped the pistol in his hand straight towards the merc. As the gun sailed through the air towards the accented man, the man let the grenade in his hand fly. The gun hit first, striking the merc right on the forehead, knocking the man out cold. The grenade was tumbling in the air towards Eric. Eric spun around and roundhouse kicked it down the hall, away to his left. The grenade exploded as it glided down the hallway, shaking the building with a satisfying rumble. Finally, all was quiet, and Eric sighed. "Well," Eric said as he stood up, "that was fun, boys. I have to go home, though." Eric strutted over to the man with the accent lying on the floor unconscious. Eric crouched down and slapped the man playfully in the face. "Hey, wake up, Sleeping Beauty. We need to talk." Eric slapped him again, harder, on the opposite cheek. "Well, I tried," Eric sighed as he pulled out a rectangular object. He flipped open the cap, and a blue-purple stream of electricity crackled between two tiny metal sticks. Eric zapped the man's lip and heard the expected yelp. "Well, it sure ain't a princess kiss, but it works too." "Ah!" the man screamed as he saw Eric's face hovering above his. "Hi," Eric said with a comedic smile. "Hey, buddy, one little question and you can be on your way. Who do you work for?" Eric's demeanor changed as he yelled out his question. "I tell you, my boss no let me live if I no tell." "Don't tell," Eric corrected. "I work for Taskmaster, and he come to kill you soon. I don't care about a stupid pet name. What's his real name?" Eric shouted as he squeezed the man's arm. No one know, you idiot. But Taskmaster will kill you soon," the merc said with confidence. "Yeah, okay. I can see you won't tell me more," Eric said. 5 minutes later, Eric was walking out of the warehouse as screams came from the main room, as the merc, tied to a crate, had a taser taped to his mouth, shocking him to death. Eric stumbled out into the open air, looking up at the now dark, starry sky. "Well, I now know my next target," Eric said, limping into the distance with a bloody shoulder. Chapter 7.
"20 men! 20 of my best trained soldiers wiped out!"
a hoarse, masked man yelled.
"Why do I pay you imbeciles if you just die on me at the first sign of resistance?"
The taskmaster paced the walkway in front of his office as hundreds of his men looked down at the ground ashamedly. "Sir, from the video we captured on the men's suits, this Punisher has tech more advanced than we've ever seen," one of the soldiers responded.
"Yes, I guess he may be harder to kill than we thought. Men, tomorrow at noon, we're heading out. I'm taking this man along."
Sir," a quiet soldier interrupted. "He actually looked more like a boy from the footage. He's tall, but young."
Okay, either way, I'm taking this boy on alone. You men will just be there to back me up. Get weapons loaded, gear cleaned, weapons cleaned. Move it, you losers! You have 12 hours!
Eric sat in his room, grunting with pain on a wooden chair next to his secret closet. His exposed left shoulder was shaking as he reached into the bullet hole to remove the projectile. "Couldn't that stupid merc have at least had a powerful enough gun to shoot clean through me?" Eric thought. "Now I have to remove this worthless piece of lead." He pushed the pliers farther down into the hole, gritting his teeth in agony. He finally grasped the bullet with the pliers and yanked it out with a groan. Eric dropped the bullet into his garbage can and wrapped his shoulder in gauze. Putting back on his shirt, Eric jumped on his bed for a quick rest. As he lay there, he remembered that he had used his best high-tech weaponry on the fight a couple hours back. And now all he had was a couple of grenades and his guns. "It'll have to be enough to defeat this joker. I don't have time to buy more materials," Eric thought. The power coursing through him had given him enhanced intellectual capacity when it came to weaponry. He had easily invented gear that no one had even thought of yet. But they weren't cheap. Gratefully, most of the men Eric crossed off the map weren't poor either, and he could afford to make more soon. But for the upcoming fight, Eric would have to use basic firearms that he owned. Then a thought struck him. Why did he want to fight this taskmaster? For all Eric knew, he'd committed no crimes, other than sending a group of men to kill him, but the police would have been quite happy if the taskmaster's men had succeeded. So why did Eric want this man dead? His mission was to kill drug dealers, murderers, and child molesters. So what was it about this mysterious soldier that made Eric so angry? "I'll just take care of this one guy, then I'll go back to the real criminals." If only Eric truly knew how evil the taskmaster was. If Eric knew the crimes of this kingpin, he wouldn't hesitate 1 second to put a bullet through his heart. But alas, it didn't matter, for Eric's path was set. Chapter 8. Eric was with his mother shopping at North Riot's only mall for clothing. Not a place Eric ever wanted to be at.
"Eric, I'm just glad you finally got out of the house. You've been locked up for weeks,"
his mother said while browsing a rack of coats. If only she knew, Eric thought. Well, it was time to get some fresh air. Eric smiled.
"Well, if you want fresh air, the mall's the last place to go."
You know what I mean, Mom. Eric rolled his eyes. Then, across the aisle, a woman screamed as she was tossed from a rack she was searching by a large, muscular, gloved hand.
"You should have considered a mask, boy,"
the large, masked man said.
"Maybe the cops haven't figured out your identity, but my men could see every detail of your stupid face."
Eric at first was very confused until he realized, this is the taskmaster. The man was covered in black body armor. He had a hood on over his skull face. Throwing stars peeked out of his sleeve, and throwing knives and a pistol hung on his belt. The man also had what looked like a sword sheathed at his hip. Do you like red? Eric jokingly questioned after noticing that all of the man's gear and armor had hints of red color accenting it. Eric's mother looked as shocked as Christian's mother had when she realized Christian had spider powers a while back.
"Listen, kid, you and me, we're similar. We could be great partners."
You're saying we're similar just because we both have skulls on our outfits? Eric laughed.
"No, boy, we're both powerful, smart, strong, and we want a better world,"
the taskmaster said as he kept walking closer to Eric. You want a better world? Coming from a man that just shoved a woman aside for fun. I think your world sounds terrible. Eric's face grew darker as he said this.
"What?"
Taskmaster looked surprised.
"Just because I pushed that female, you think my dream sucks? You don't even know my plan, you idiot. Listen, kid, I know you have power in you. No human could do what you do without it. See, that's where we're similar, kid. I have the same power in my blood."
Eric was shocked. He thought he was the only one. That's impossible! Eric shouted. I saw the only man other than my friend who had this power die. He died. I saw a weird green mist rise from his body and he died.
"I don't know what you're talking about, kid, but some months ago I was bestowed with this gift."
Then Eric realized why he detested this man so much. Whatever power was in the so-called taskmaster was revolted and repelled by Eric's power within him. Well, why are you here then? Eric asked with a puzzled look. What did you come here for? To kill me? Capture me? Recruit me?
"Whichever is easiest."
the taskmaster coolly said with a glare. I don't want to fight you, Eric stated. I'm after the real criminals, not whatever you are. Eric glared at the masked man disdainfully. By this time, a large crowd had gathered, watching the spectacle in the mall. Then a police force of about 6 men arrived, hoping to calm the clearly inevitable fight. Eric was nervous. His gear and weapons were all at home. All he had on him was his bulletproof skull vest underneath his clothes, plus one small pistol under his shirt.
You think I'm not worth your time?
Taskmaster raised his voice.
If you kill criminals, then brother, I'm your man. You would shudder at the atrocities I've committed.
You're so confusing. I still don't understand your endgame, Eric stated. Do you want to fight? Why would you come here just for a fight?
I was testing you, kid. But you're not worth recruiting. You don't see the bigger picture,
the man said, using his arms to gesture widely.
You're focused on the small issues, like petty crimes.
And what is the bigger picture, you maniac? Eric raised his voice and stepped closer to Taskmaster, so they were eye to eye, a foot apart.
We need a strong leader,
the Taskmaster shouted, spitting into Eric's face.
Every president hides behind his army because they're weak and useless. A true leader leads his army and can fight just as well or better than his men. That's how the kings of old did it. That's how the United States will succeed. Join me. Be my second in command and conquer with me.
Sounds like a totalitarian society to me. Oh, wait. You never went to school. You probably don't even know what that is.
Shut up!
Taskmaster screamed as he slapped Eric hard on his cheek. Eric's mother was cowering in the corner with many other shoppers that were too interested to run away and too scared to show themselves. Mrs. Howler had been in a kind of stupor from all the craziness surrounding her son, but as soon as Eric was struck in the face, she woke up in a sense and screamed out. Eric, not wanting to let Taskmaster know who his mother was, spit blood out of his mouth and said, Lady, I would run far away. He didn't turn his face, still looking Taskmaster straight in the face. You're both under arrest, one of the police officers shouted. Put your hands in the air. Both enemies still were staring at each other, not moving a muscle. You heard the man's skull brains. You're under arrest.
You're more wanted than me. I've done nothing wrong. I'm just a citizen taking down a criminal.
Taskmaster spat. They don't know I'm the Punisher. To them, you're just a bully picking on a kid.
Take that shirt off. I bet your famous skull's under there somewhere.
Taskmaster glared. Quickly as he could, Eric whipped his fist around, punching the skull mask with a crack. Eric screamed in pain and stumbled back.
My mask a little harder than you thought, huh? Quit now before you break another finger.
Eric's ring finger in his right hand had split, but he still drew his pistol with ease, firing 2 quick shots at Taskmaster's chest.
Kevlar, kid. Get some.
Taskmaster laughed and snapped a throwing star at Eric's chest in return. The star bounced off, clinging to the tile floor. Already have, jerk. Okay, you two, that's enough. The police officer, still at the edge of the crowd, shouted. I'll shoot.
Zip it, you minimum wage mall cop.
I'm not a minimum wage. But the officer's voice was cut short as the Taskmaster whipped a second throwing star towards him without even looking. The star sliced through the officer's throat, dropping him dead on the floor. No! Eric screamed with great passion. Keep them out of this, you maniac! I thought this was just between us.
Well, it was,
The taskmaster said without care.
but he was ruining my moment. And I'm sure he'll be fine.
Eric glanced over at the cop laying in an ever-growing pool of blood. Taskmaster shrugged.
Maybe not. Are you insane?
Eric went berserk, grabbing a metal coat rack from an aisle and tossing it with all his strength at Taskmaster. The rack sailed through the air, pinning Taskmaster to the floor before he could run fully out of the way. The rack was lying on Taskmaster's leg, keeping him from wriggling away.
You just can't miss, kid.
Taskmaster croaked.
But you have to realize I've watched you, so neither can I.
At this, the Taskmaster threw a knife from his belt as Eric approached for the death blow. The knife flew backwards, bouncing off a pole and perfectly returning to Eric's back, hitting high above the Kevlar vest near Eric's neck. Eric dropped to his knees, quickly pulling the knife from his flesh. As blood trickled down his back, he tossed the knife back at Taskmaster with all the power he could muster in his weakened form. But by this time, Taskmaster had pulled his trapped leg free, and he threw up the rack, once pinning him, to block the knife Eric threw. Then, in the small moment of surprise, Taskmaster jumped up from behind the rack. He did a quick run and jumped at Eric, swinging his leg for a direct kick to Eric's head. But Eric ducked and grabbed Taskmaster's now exposed back with two firm grasps. Eric then kneed Taskmaster in the back, knocking him to the floor with a thud. He then jumped down onto Taskmaster's back, pinning him yet again face down to the floor. Eric pulled the masked face up, then with one quick blow knocked the Taskmaster's head down hard onto the smooth, polished tile floor. Eric heard a crack and truly hoped he'd broken the Taskmaster's skull. But instead it was just the mask that had split. Eric ripped off the mask, revealing a dark-complected face beneath. Then suddenly Christian and Rebel pushed through the crowd, bursting to the front of the amused onlookers. "Eric, stop!" Christian shouted from across the room. Eric hesitated to land his fist on Taskmaster's face when he heard Christian's voice. When Christian had heard the breaking news about a kid fighting a masked assailant, he hadn't paid attention, until he saw Eric's face on his television screen. Christian had called all his friends, and Rebel had immediately responded and come to the mall with Christian in a hurry, soon followed by his sister, Abby, and another friend, Catherine. Christian didn't have much of a plan, but whatever had been going on with Eric was serious, and now Eric was in a deadly situation. When Christian called out, "Eric, stop!" he immediately realized how stupid it sounded. "Go the heck away, Christian," Eric yelled out with a growl while still pinning Taskmaster's face down. "This is my business, not yours." "That's where you're wrong, Eric. I don't care what you say. I gave you the power. I know I did. It changed you, and that's my fault. So I'm here to fix what I did." Then Eric pulled back his fist and slammed it into Taskmaster's face, crushing his nose. "No, Eric, no!" Christian yelled as he broke past the wall of the crowd, running straight at Eric as he winded up for another punch. Christian jumped on Eric, trying to pull him away from Taskmaster's body, with all the strength in his own body. But Eric wasn't unhooked from his victim, nor was he even shaken as he flipped Christian off his back, slamming him head over heels into the wall behind him. Christian cried out as his bones in his body cracked from the impact. Eric didn't even flinch, continuing to punch the unmasked Taskmaster over and over in the face until blood had coated Eric's fists. Rebel, seeing Christian slumped over on the floor, was in shock and sprinted up to Eric without thinking. "No, Eric, no!" Rebel cried out, grasping his bulky shoulder. "Look what you've done! Look what you freaking did!" Eric glanced back at Christian's injured body and then looked back to Rebel. "He'll live." "He'll live?" Rebel screamed. "He'll live? You could have killed your best friend, and you don't even care? What had that stupid power done to you? Look, Eric, open your eyes. We care about you. All of us, we love and care about you. Me, Christian, Catherine, Abby, look, we all came to help you. You need to stop this now. Eric stared at Rebel and didn't even blink as he let his fist taste Taskmaster's face once again. Then Rebel remembered Christian's words before they had arrived at the mall. If he's shocked or surprised while you're touching his skin, he will lose his power, Rebel. But then she had interrupted him, too anxious to listen longer. Why didn't I listen to his warning? I interrupted him, and it might have been important. But it didn't matter now, because Eric was killing the man lying on the ground, and it was now or never. So Rebel jumped in front of Eric and wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her lips to his. Her dark brown hair hung down as she lingered. Eric was too surprised to immediately pull away. Then he felt a small shock on his lips, directly where Rebel's pressed onto his. He pulled away quickly and fell back onto the floor, staring up at the ceiling. The dark cloud in his mind washed away like cleaning a dirty car window, and he sat up with a start. "No!" Eric screamed so loud Rebel's ears hurt. "What have I done? I've killed so many. I'm a murderer." His voice fizzled out as his body shut down and he went to sleep from the shock. Chapter 9. A murmur went through the crowd as the police officers removed Eric's Kevlar vest, revealing to the crowd a bright white skull. Rebel sat with Christian, shocked by this new revelation. Christian had a few broken limbs and was lying in a stretcher, ready to go off to a hospital. "This power," Rebel whispered to Christian, "it's too much for anyone to handle. We have to destroy it." "No, Rebel. It can be used for good," Christian painstakingly whispered. "In the right hands, it can help others." "I used it well, Rebel. Eric used it wrong." "Yes, but how do we know the next powered individual will use it like you did?" Rebel asked. "And who has the power now?" Christian was about to tell Rebel the truth, but he hesitated, and for some reason didn't speak. "Rebel, whatever happens, we'll all be here, to work together." Eric, unconscious, was taken away to the police. Christian hoped to find out where and visit him soon. Taskmaster was also carried away as he spit bloody mouthfuls of curses at who knows who. Eric's mother was comforted by Abby and her friend Catherine, but the shock of what her son had done was too much to bear. Christian pondered in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Taskmaster still had the power, and he truly hoped it stayed that way. But what concerned him more was Rebel. He was the only one that knew that she had shocked Eric with a kiss and taken the power, corrupting his mind. Would it affect her negatively too? Or would she use it well? The world was changing. Christian thought back and wondered what had caused this drastic change in the world. Who or what was behind it, and what would happen next? Epilogue. Rebel sat on the cold tile floor in the middle of the now almost deserted mall, wondering what this weird feeling in her chest was, and trying to conjure up enough energy to get up and go home. Her thoughts of standing up were interrupted by a southern-accented voice from behind her. "You're the gal who kissed the Punisher, aren't ya?" The funny-sounding voice came from a policeman that had wandered from the remaining group of police and walked close to Rebel's seated self. "Yeah, that was me," Rebel replied. "Seemed like the only way to fix things, I guess." "Sometimes the best actions are the weirdest ones," the man chuckled. "Learned that from one of my friends, Trey. He's, my friend." Rebel tilted her head at the officer's awkward statement. "Listen, name's Justin Lark." The man stuck out his hand, and Rebel grasped it very lightly with 2 fingers. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Justin." "This Punisher case?" Justin started. "It's a complicated one. It's gonna take quite a while to sort through. I'm gonna have to ask you, ma'am, to come up to the precinct with me for questioning, seeing how you were pretty instrumental in his capture." Rebel was now annoyed. She realized then, as she was looking at the floor, that she hadn't noticed a police badge on this man. She snapped her head up, but there it was. A badge sat right on Justin's vest, but Rebel swore she hadn't seen it before. Justin grinned and reached out his hand to help her up, carefully pulling Rebel to her feet. Justin and Rebel walked out towards the patrol car, heading towards the police station. It'll be quick, Rebel thought. Just a few questions, and I'll go home. Thank you so much for listening to Issue 2 of Trading Hands. This is Christian Smith, and the production of Issue 3 will be starting shortly.